A lot of times brands want to do virtually exactly what they are doing physically. We do a flagship store and you walk in and you go around the car and you sit in the car and that's exactly what we're going to do in the metaverse. And I'm like, no, that's not what you should be doing in the metaverse. You should be doing things that you cannot do physically, right?
Hello and welcome to Polyweb. I'm your host, Sara Landi Tortoli. In this episode, we explore the topic of brand strategies for entering and dominating the metaverse with Diego Borgo. Diego is an NFT and Metaverse specialist and advisor for brands such as Adidas and Porsche. During our conversation, we discussed the concept of the metaverse and the unique opportunities and use cases for brands. Please enjoy this conversation with Diego Borgo. Diego, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to be here.
Me too. So let's start with your background, actually, because you are a consultant for some very high-profile brand. I remember, top of my head, Adidas, and now more recently, Porsche. So how did you start this journey?
Yeah, I mean, the overall journey started when I was 16 years old, right? So I started working when I was 16 years old in an agency back in Brazil that we were looking to gaming and esports and how brands could take advantage of that upcoming trend and that subculture, to position themselves in to get it early and to sort of like make their moves in that space, right? So that was sort of like the first job I ever had. And that was exciting for me because it was working with like brands like Samsung, Red Bull, Warner Bros, Microsoft, and we were helping them navigate that sort of like new space. There are a lot of different things happen in my career that are not as relevant, but one of the key milestones was when I first heard of blockchain. Right in 2017, I first heard of the technology per se, and then I just dove straight in because I was really excited about the use case, the possibilities, and everything that come along with that technology. Problem is, I'm a branding guy, right? I couldn't find my space within that community. So I kept sort of like looking from the sidelines. And all of that changed to me when I first heard of NFTs, right? NFTs for me were that moment in time where culture gets with technology and creates a new shift and a new paradigm and sort of like a new stories to be told and to people to connect with each other. So I was really excited. And that happened when I was with Adidas, right? I spent 4 years as a consultant, external consultant inside of Adidas headquarters. I spent the last 8 years of my career consulting brands in marketing, digital strategy, and branding. And the last 4 was at Adidas. So NFTs happen. I am at Adidas. People from the company already sort of like friends of mine already pushing the brand towards that direction. And then they invite me to join that in this task force team that was happening, that was aimed at delivering to the metaverse, right? And we delivered into the metaverse December last, which is almost a year now, funny enough to think about. And then we went on and had a partnership with Prada. So we did Adidas and Prada partnership as well. And by end of last year, I basically decided doing what I always done, advising or consulting big brands. So that's what I've been doing basically since the beginning of this year. So as you mentioned, I was working with Adidas before. We did that work with Prada. I've been working with Unilever. I've been working with L'Oreal. I've been working with Skoda from the Volkswagen Group. I've been working with Cupra from the Volkswagen Group. I've worked with Porsche. I've been working with Shell, MasterCard. So brands on that side, right? Trying to understand how to operate within the metaverse, how to enter NFTs, how to look into Web3. So I've been doing a lot of work on that direction. The second thing I've been doing a lot is spending a lot of time with Web3 founders. And the third thing I've done is I spend a lot of time on the education side of things, right? Because this is so new and so many people are trying to understand what's happening. I took on the role to be the translator, to make it easy to sort of like help others to understand, help others to get it, and create a safe space, right? Where everybody feels comfortable to come and join. Everybody feels welcome to this community.
Okay, let's continue on the education side then 1 second. And I would like to start this conversation by talking about a rather complex concept, but so that we are all aligned. What is the metaverse? Or rather, even better, what is the idea that those big brands have of what is the metaverse?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Let's answer both because I think it's relevant. I'll say what the metaverse is for me. There's a million of different definitions there, and everybody's coming up with theirs. So, like, it's fair to me to throw mine. So the metaverse for me is an evolution of the internet, right? Is an evolution of how we connect digitally as a species, as humans, right? So for me, it's basically an evolution of the interface of the internet, but also is the ultimate bridge between physical and digital. Mobile obviously has created a shorter gap between physical and digital world, but I'm really, really, really bullish on the metaverse as an interface, and especially in AR, augmented reality, as the interface to create the ultimate bridge between physical and digital, right? So if you want to talk blue sky, I imagine that, a couple of years from now, we're going to be wearing glasses, not goggles. That's not what I think will happen, but glasses where we will be adding layers of, augmented reality where, wherever we're going. So that for me, what the metaverse will enable, and that's what I think it is. For brands, for them, like it differs, right? It has sort of like a definition and their different take into it. But a lot of the brands I'm working with, they're looking to a new space or a new medium where they can connect with customers, they can build communities, they can get together with fans and provide an experience or provide immersive experiences that is not possible for them to provide today. Right. So think about e-commerce. So how you shop, they want to enhance that experience. They want to bring customers closer. They want to make that experience better. They want to provide a product experience or a brand experience that today is not possible because either there are limitations or because it's hard to scale such a thing in a global level. And they're looking into the metaverse as a new medium for them to do so, which is exciting. Others are looking to keeping relevant, right? They are looking to the demographics. They are connecting the metaverse really closely with gaming. So they are thinking, like, oh, Gen Z is spending more and more time on gaming. Therefore, as they mature or as they grew up, or even, Gen Alpha, they will be interested in spending more time in this place if we make it cool. And for them, it's going to be one-to-one, the sort of like the behavior, because they've been already purchasing in-game assets. They've been already purchasing skins. They've been purchasing already, premium memberships. And for them, that element of keeping fresh and relevant and appealing for the upcoming generations by investing early in the metaverse and trying to learn and navigate that concept is a lot of the times the motive why they're trying to come in, right? Others are curious. Others have, listened to a lot of the hype. Others have seen a lot of the craziness that happened since Facebook had changed their name to Meta, and they just wanted to explore. They want to keep looking into the possibility. I think it's a mix of curiosity, but also the possibility of opportunities, seeing new opportunities, but also, like trying to keep up with the new cycles of technology. Because a lot of those brands, they miss the boat when the internet went mainstream and they weren't ready for e-commerce. And, then they missed the boat with social media because they were like, oh no, we wait. And like, this is nothing relevant here, nothing to see here. It's just, people sharing their photos of their breakfast and how they're looking towards, and they're like, oh, maybe there is a repetition of a cycle, right? So this time they want to be there. This time they want to be trying. This time they want to be investigating early on to see whether this is going to take off or not.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, that these, let's say, Web1 brands or brands that in a way predated the internet kind of missed the boat on Web2.
Big time.
But now it feels like instead Web2 is missing the boat on Web3, whereas Web1 brands, are kind of ahead of the curve when it comes to Web3 adoption. That is, if you equal Web3 with Metaverse, which is, it can be also, a Metaverse can also be built in a very centralized way, right? I mean,
100%. Yeah, it doesn't. The Metaverse doesn't need Web3 to be built. I believe that the true metaverse will survive in 10, 15 years from now, just if it's built on Web3. But that's my personal take. But today you don't need to, right? You don't have to have blockchain as a backbone. You don't have to enable crypto wallets or cryptocurrencies or NFTs or any of those things. You don't have to. Right. But I believe that as this concept evolves and expands, and as the internet iterates and evolves at the same time alongside, I think it's going to be a no-brainer looking into Web3 as the backbone for the metaverse. But, today it's not necessarily mandatory. I agree.
Yeah. And especially you can even build like a decentralized Web3 metaverse. But if you need goggles, and those goggles are manufactured by Meta, Apple, you have what I think of as the gatekeeper problem. It's basically the same problem that you have right now with the App Store, right? So if like few brands control the access to the metaverse, they are actually gatekeepers to that. So I don't know. Let's see how these develop moving forward.
I mean, on that side, I'm always the first one to jump on that and take on VR, right? Like, I might be utterly wrong, but I don't think that VR is going to go as mainstream as big tech. It's hard for me to imagine that we will be willing to spend 8, 10, 12, 16 hours a day as we do now with screens, different screens, that being computer phones, tablets, whatever, wearing goggles most of the time, right? Like if you've experienced, if you spend more than 2 or 3 hours wearing it in different circumstances and moments, you will understand that it's basically impossible to imagine doing that for a very long period of time. Right. So I don't dismiss the importance of VR as a technology, and I don't say it will be dead. What I'm saying is I don't think it's going to go as mainstream as all big tech's pushing. Right. That's why I'm bullish on AR. It's so much more intuitive. It's so much more comfortable. There's more utility on that experience because you can interact with both worlds. VR, I see, being an edge case for gaming, being a strong case for simulators, right? That being healthcare, any type of like simulation where you really need to be immersed on something that you don't need reality or you don't need the physical reality for, right? So for me, VR plays a role where you want to basically shut down reality around you and go somewhere totally else, right? And get entirely immersed on that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. So when I see, for example, the latest developments of putting a camera on Gogo, a VR Gogo, and then that camera is recording the room around you and creating almost like a virtual experience with that room, I'm just questioning. I'm like, why don't you then go for AR instead if you really want to have the room around you, right? Why would you shut down the entire experience and add like a fake layer of the reality that you're in just because it's virtual reality, right? So I don't really grasp that concept, and I think that we're heading more and more towards AR. That's where I'm so bullish on that, right? Like I think that's gonna be, if there is a potential replacement for the phone, I think that can be it.
Yeah, and the question is then how do you access that, right? So you won't have a phone anymore probably, but you will have something else, and then the question is who's controlling this something else, right?
The device, who's behind the device, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That remains relevant. But let's go back 1 second to use cases for brands on the metaverse, right? So first of all, should every brand think of establishing a presence already this early on in the metaverse? And if so, what are the concrete use cases that some brands, or the one that you can think of, should pursue to enter the metaverse?
Yeah. So should every brand be thinking about it? I think that every brand that wants to remain relevant for the long term and identifies that new demographics and new technologies are relevant for their mix of strategy, the answer is yes. Right? Like this is indeed a new technology suite that will enable you doing things that weren't possible before. Right. So you need to be exploring, or you need to be trying to understand. You need to be, like experimenting with it 100%. So I would start from there. And I don't see the need of like doing major things. I don't see the need of like building your own platform or building your own experience or any of it by exploring. I mean, you can take part on already existing events, right? You can do small things. You can gather your community and sense check whether is even relevant to them, right? You can bring customers from your brand to a small immersive experience, invitees only, and spend almost nothing there and sense check if people find that there is value on this, right? So there are different ways of exploration and experimentation and different levels. So, in those terms, I think it's really interesting and should be relevant for them. On the use case, I think that there is always a big differentiation, right? We talk a lot about B2C, right? So we talk a lot about business directly into consumer and all of that. So if you look at the metaverse or the B2B metaverse, I think that's where there's a lot of relevance as well. So I find that to be extremely powerful for sort of like the B2B or the metaverse B2B, if you will, factory as well, right? So how do you improve performance or decrease costs or improve different aspects of it on site? I think that's a great use case as well for sort of like that side engineering as well. Future of work, right? We all more and more working remote now, and we feel more apart from our colleagues, or collaboration becomes hard because the tools that are on the way are not necessarily the best tools. So how do you go about utilizing, for example, HoloLens as a manner to bring people closer, or to enhance collaboration, or to make those work environment more productive for the people to get together? So that's sort of like on the B2B side of things, right? Which is not what a lot of people are talking about, but I think is where a lot of the impact is going to come from. On the other side, on the B2C side of things, I think the beautiful case here to make is that the metaverse is not a new channel. You shouldn't be looking at that as a new channel, like you look at Twitter or Facebook or CRM or e-commerce or even retail. What I think is exciting about the metaverse is utilizing it almost like as a new medium, right? So a new medium on which you can tell stories differently, a new medium on which you can connect with customers in a manner that wasn't possible before, a new medium where you can enhance experience, right? So it goes beyond than advertising or just, posting something. I think literally the metaverse should be seen as a strategic and structural part of a business, right? It's not just marketing. It's not just social, right? It goes beyond that. It goes like, how can you give a better user experience for customer service, for example? How can you enhance a better experience for training, right? So how can you train your employees or people that are connected to your brand or to your product? How can you better train them to better serve customers within that environment? How can you give a better experience for products, right? So we're talking about e-commerce or shopping before. So, how do you go from flipping through, flat photos on a website, or maybe having a 3D that you can go around the product, or maybe having a video, to having a full immersive experience where you can interact with that thing. And, by buying within that space, it sends directly to your home, right? So those are the things I'm looking at. Those are the things I'm excited about. Also gathering people together. You as a brand, you have fans all over the world, right? But it's almost impossible for you to bring them all together physically to one space. It can be possible, but is extremely costly, right? So how do you utilize that space to do the so famous community building that we've been talking so much lately? So, you gather people together, you bring them to a certain space, you give certain experience based on past behaviors. That's why NFTs become interesting, because you can build a whole membership layer or a whole loyalty layer on top of that you can gain experience. You can, divide groups and get them together.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I really love thinking about the metaverse as a new medium rather than just a new channel, like something that will replace your phone, maybe, or reality, right? Because
Yeah,
that's what we are
100%.
talking about, actually, replacing
Yeah.
reality somehow.
Yeah, I like using the complementation, right? It's complementing it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's giving a layer that didn't exist before, right? Or if it did exist, now it can be much deeper, or it can be much better explored. So I think replacement always comes on a negative manner, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's going to be like the Matrix, or it's going to be like Ready Player One, right? It's going to replace entirely, and we're going to live in at home in the dark and nothing matters. And we're going to be just with goggles on 24/7. I was like, yeah, that's exactly what my mom told when video games came about, right? And here we are. So I'm a little bit torn with those negative only thought trains. I'm fully aware that people will abuse, as people did abuse the TV, as people did abuse video games, as people did abuse the internet, as people do abuse TikToks and Instagrams and all of that. It's gonna happen. It's a fact. It's human behavior. But I think it's a bit early to sort of like say that's going to replace it all and it's the dawn of humanity because, another emergent technology comes to place.
Yeah. Whenever there is a new technology is coming in, there is always the super optimistic and then the super pessimistic, right? And then
Yeah,
most often reality is somewhere in between those views, right?
100%. Yeah.
So let's talk about strategy for brands to enter the metaverse. So,
Mhm.
and let's do that by talking about your concrete experience without naming names. But
Yeah.
what does a good strategy for a brand entering the metaverse look like? You know, like for example, what are the early decisions that they need to make when entering the metaverse? And what are the most common challenges that you saw them facing while doing that?
Yeah. So let's break it down into the first. So how a good strategy looks like, and I'll walk you through the process of how I do it. Right. I have this sort of like five step approach to it, where we go, from the beginning to quote unquote the end of very high level pillars that you should be looking at. Right. So the first thing I always look at is the brand strategy, right? Because I'm a brand guy. I come from that point of view. So as soon as we start engaging, I'm like, okay, can you like educate me on your brand strategy, right? Because there are three things that are interesting about brand strategy. The first thing is as soon as you start thinking brand strategy, you're thinking long term, right? Because every brand strategy is made between 5 to 10 years in the future, right? That's what they're looking for. So as soon as you put the mentality or the mindset within that, you think long term. So that changes already the conversation. The second thing is that as soon as we start looking into brand strategy, it becomes much easier to sell in internally or to have a conversation internally with other stakeholders because they're bringing you to the brand strategy meeting, right? They're bringing you to those big moments where everybody from the brand that are doing something relevant will be part of. So it becomes easier to have a conversation because if your metaverse strategy is underpinning the brand strategy, there is a easier way for you to be relevant within that long-term plan. And then the third thing is brand consistency, right? So we've seen a lot of things that some brands or some markets have done something really on the side and nobody was aware and out of a sudden it's out and then you asking people from global like, have you seen this? Are you guys part of this? Like, no, we did not. Like there was something on the market and it's not even on brand and it goes against what we are trying to do. So that happens every day, right? Is the nature of major brands, and that's why for me, like the consistency and brand consistency is really important in that. So that's step one, right? The step two, usually where I go is we go about like the whys, right? So why are you doing this? Are we just trying to make a quick buck at the very beginning of a new digital transformation, or are we, trying to experiment right now, but also believing and betting and learning and experimenting to be ready for the future? Right. So we always sort of like try to understand the why you're doing this, why it matters, why now. Because a lot of people are just like, oh, I don't know, like everybody's doing it. So I think we should do it too. Which is fair. It could be that case. But then let's dig deeper on that element, right? Like what is in for you? Right. And more especially what is in for the user, for the fan, for the customers. So that's sort of like the second step. And then we go into ideation, right? So it's kind of like, okay, what are the ideas that are on the table right now? What are the things that you're imagining that will be interesting for you to be doing, right? We are in a moment in time that everything's possible. And the technology, despite its limitations still, because it's early, will provide us a canvas to tell or to do or to create anything. Because we are taking layers of complexity, for example, from law of physics. There is no law of physics in the metaverse, right? Everything's possible. There is no physical limitations. There is no geography, right? So you're taking those major layers that before were really staying in between. activating really cool ideas because, it's not possible to bring 100,000 fans from all over the world in one place. It's going to cost a fortune, right? And now we can, right? Oh, we couldn't fly before, and now you can. Right, our product is a physical element, and now being a digital element, it can be anything. Right, so I always try to like get that thinking going, because a lot of times brands want to do virtually exactly what they are doing physically. You see, like, oh, we do a flagship store, and you walk in and you go around the car and you sit in the car and you feel the car, and that's exactly what we're going to do in the metaverse. And I'm like, no, that's not what you should be doing in the metaverse. You should be doing things that you cannot do physically, right? I understand that there's some UX patterns you need to follow to keep people, understanding what's happening, but that shouldn't be a limitation, right? For me, in the metaverse, the only limitation you're going to have creativity, right? So we spend a lot of time on ideation, looking into models like, what can we do now? What can we do next? And what can we do later? Right. So now being the easy, low hanging fruit. So we experiment. Next being something that you need to invest more time, more money, more resources behind. And then later being that crazy thing that's the blue sky idea that hopefully or potentially could change the entire way this business works. Right. So if money is unlimited, how do we go in each of those pillars, and how do you sort of like brainstorm about it? Right. And then the fourth aspect of it is going down the rabbit hole. Right. So which platform do we want to use, right? Which metaverse platform fits the best, what we are trying to achieve, who are the tech partners we're going to partner with. If you want to go like Web3 hardcore, how do we go about NFTs? How do we go about cryptocurrencies? How do we go about, potentially minting? If we go NFTs, what are we going to use NFTs for? Depending on the platform we go, what are the limitations or what are the benefits of utilizing those platforms? How do we going to go to community, right? Not go to market, but go to community. How do we going to go about understanding that community, bringing them closer to us, and making sure that what we are providing is relevant to them, right? So really going down that rabbit hole. Who do we want to talk with? Is that Web2 user? Is that Web3 native? Is that, crypto head? Is that NFT head? Like, who are the demographics, right? So we go down that direction. And then the fifth and last step is basically KPIs and metrics, right? So how do we measure? What do we measure? How does success look like? What is success? So really looking into ways of analyzing everything we are about to do to make sure that we, one, can keep on track and see if things are working. But two, because this is a lot about experimentation and trying out things, is what can we learn now that we can apply to the next one, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. Because the real game here of what's happening right now is you need to be working in the now to be ready for the future, right? So when this thing does hit mainstream, as we think it will, you want to be like sharp, because there won't be any time to experiment anymore, right? And maybe you can copy, and maybe you can sort of like learn with their mistakes, but you won't be a pioneer. And that's fine, right? But if you want to be a pioneer, you're going to be experimenting right now and be ready for it when it comes.
Absolutely. I want to follow up on your framework, because there is a lot of decisions that a brand needs to do early on, just even before thinking about the metaverse, etc. I imagine there are
Totally.
a lot of conversations also that they need to have internally, right, for this to happen. So, what are the main challenges at this stage that you saw brands facing that they need to overcome?
Well, so the main challenge is education right now, right? So like really knowing what's happening and really sort of like understanding and having the right people around them to guide them into this sort of very complex environment, but also nobody has the answers. Right. So a lot of times when people feature me as an expert or, guru, whatever crazy name people I heard labeling me with, I'm like, no, like I'm not an expert, right? Nobody is. And if someone is telling you now that they are an expert, they're full of shit, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's happening, right? We're trying to figure out, we're learning together, and things are moving and changing really fast, especially when you start like stacking up all those technologies. Because as soon as you talk metaverse, again, we talk Web3. And as soon as we talk Web3, we talk cryptocurrency, we talk digital wallets, we talk NFTs, decentralized finance, we talk decentralized autonomous organizations. So as soon as you start like bringing this all together as the new sort of like set of technologies that will be shaping the future of the internet, like whoever is telling you that, one, they know everything, and two, that they're an expert on it, they're lying, right? Because it's impossible to know. It's just happening as we speak. So that's the main challenge, right? So how do you get the right people around you? How do you get educated? So usually those trends will be led by the consulting firms, right? They'll be led by the big agencies. They'll be led by by the big names. And what's happening in this case is that the people that have been spending their time and have been really like experiencing and experimenting and keeping a finger on the pulse and spending time with the communities and building, which are individuals or small groups, they are the ones shaping so far the future of the space. So they are the ones that are better positioned to know and to explain what's happening. And now you see major agencies scrambling to understand, and consulting groups sort of like trying to make their mind, but very few are getting right. So that's what's exciting, because it's a different mindset. So what happens usually within those brands is that you have one or two enthusiasts or degens, if you will, that were sitting inside of those brands and they're excited about it and then try to get traction. And then they find someone that resonates and understands from the space. They bring them together and they start building it together. Right. So the challenge, like the key challenge is education, without a doubt. But as soon as you start navigating from there onwards, then there's much bigger challenges that you will be encountering, because if you're operating on like in a Fortune 500 level, you'll be having major challenges on resources. So how do you convince leadership to assign full-timers or resources to those positions? Dealing with this wild west that's Web3 and cryptocurrencies a lot of the times. Right. So how do you convince other members of the organization that it's worth giving a shot in a moment that obviously our global economy is not at its best shape? It's difficult showing the possibilities in a moment that everybody or majority of the people were just hearing the negative from the mainstream media. So I think that the ones that are really pushing the needle and really making it happen right now within those major brands are the real heroes right now, right? Because every odd is against them. Every moment is against them. They're swimming against the stream. And still we see a lot of brands coming out and doing cool stuff and learning and iterating and trying to sort of like shape the future of this whole thing. So, like if there are challenges, I think those are sort of like the key three challenge, right? One is education. Two is the corporate machine. And then three is going through the details that nobody have the answer, which is like legal, corporate, finance. Nobody have the answer for those things, right? One of the things I do within my role is I keep connecting departments from major brands to talk to each other, because they're the ones sort of like shaping the landscape right now, right? Because nobody have the answer. This wasn't done before, right? And it's really exciting to see that collaboration is happening and mindsets are shifting.
Absolutely. And it's very fascinating, all this journey and all these hoops that brands have to jump in order to get there. I'm curious, I'm sure there is no good or bad answer here. And probably the answer is it depends. But
Yes.
but do you have an example or rather the ingredient of a good metaverse strategy versus a bad one?
It's hard. It's hard. And not me trying to be political, but it's hard because a good strategy would deliver against whatever they set themselves to, right? So if their strategy was to test and learn and they achieved that, I will call it a good strategy. Or if they wanted to just do an activation to raise awareness on the PR side of things or get the conversation going, that will be for me a good strategy. It's difficult to say without sort of like knowing from inside
Okay.
out.
Let's take an example of a sustainable strategy, not just
Right.
to enter the metaverse, but to dominate, to acquire
Right.
a position of strength and even leadership, in the metaverse to make it sustainable over time. Let's say that that's
Yeah.
the objective. If that is the objective, what does a good strategy look like?
So what I would say is the most important thing you need to be thinking of are three things. The first thing is there is not one metaverse. The metaverse is an overall platform. The metaverse is an overall concept, like the internet. It's an overall concept. Nobody owns it. Nobody owns the internet. Nobody owns the metaverse, right? you will have metaverse platforms under that concept.
We can argue with that no one owns the internet.
So-
It's true, no one owns the internet, but there are some companies that indeed have managed to capture like a consistent chunk of the value of the internet.
For sure, 100%. And that's going to happen in the metaverse too, right? But you cannot tell that one company owns the whole thing per se. That's what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
And in the metaverse is the same. Right now, there is one major company trying to claim ownership over the metaverse. And I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they're right. I understand their strategy, right? What I'm saying is you have different metaverse platforms, like you have Amazon, like you have Facebook, like you have eBay, right? Those, or like you have Google. Those companies have conquered a big chunk of the internet, but they don't own the internet. They own their corner on the internet, right? And so will happen with metaverse platforms. We'll have companies or groups or individuals owning corners of those metaverse platforms, and each platform is going to have its role, right? You're going to go because of that, you're going to go there because of this, and things going to be different on that side. So going back to the point is, if one of those three main ways of sort of like conquering space is understanding that, and then going about testing out each and all those platforms that you identify to be relevant for your brand and for your customers, and being there and creating a presence. As I said, it can be a minimal presence, can be a huge presence, right? Whatever you feel comfortable with, but exploring those different platforms and seeing how you can leverage the best on each of them is going to be a key success factor. I give you an example of Web2. How does a brand conquers social media? By going there and being present on all of them. Not just present on all of them, but being natively relevant to all of them. The content you put out on Instagram is not relevant on YouTube. The content you put on YouTube may not be relevant on LinkedIn. The content you put on LinkedIn may not be relevant on Twitter. So all those different social media platforms have different audience, and people are going there because of different reasons. So they expect to see different types of behavior, even though the brand is the same. So how do you go one-to-one with that into the metaverse platforms? So that's one key factor, right? You have an overall metaverse strategy, you have a brand strategy, and then you have like platform strategies, right? Like, as complex as it sounds, that's the future we're heading to. If you want to dominate and you want to be the one like that takes it over. The second thing is understanding how you will provide value, right? So it's not just about how I'm going to extract money, but rather how do I will provide value? What does my consumer base or consumer fans or target group or demographics that you're looking into, what do they give a fuck about, right? Like, what do they want to see? What do they want to get from you, right? Yeah, they want you to go there and do the same lame shit you do physically, or they want you to do there and expect you to do something different, right? And that can vary based on the platform, or it can vary based on the demographic per se. Is gonna be fundamental again, right? So not replicating what you're doing on the physical world in the digital world and just hoping it sticks. That's already like a good way to start off, right? It's really understanding, like, when people go to this platform, like, what are they expecting, right? Why are they there, and how you can be relevant. I think that's going to be fundamental. And then the third and most important thing of all of that, obviously, is how do you generate revenue from it, right? How do you create sustainability through new or already existing revenue streams, so you can, go back and keep reinvesting on that research and keep reinvesting on those activities to keep growing your brand exponentially from there. So that's a hard nut to crack, because, we are at the very beginning of all of it, but there are numerous manners on which you can be looking to revenue streams and ways of generating revenue within those platforms. One very, very clear manner that we are already witnessing is fashion, right? Like, digital wearables or digital fashion is something that we are already seeing that brands are already being able to capture within those platforms, right? And the reason for that is very simple. we as humans now migrating or exploring more and more virtual worlds will bring alongside with us the same behavior we have in the physical world, which is the way I dress up is to give reasons to give signs to the external world on how I want to be perceived. Right. So that cultural element of human race won't change. And so will be displayed as soon as you have an avatar. You'll make sure that you go there and you put your touch and you want to be seen this way and that way. Could be that it's one of you, like Sarah, the way you look here, you're going to be looking in the metaverse. Or it could be like, I want to be totally different, right? I want to be seen like a unicorn in the metaverse and you are not a unicorn in the physical world. But the element of I will be, tuning and customizing my appearance in the metaverse will be fundamental. And those items that will be represented by NFTs are basically wearables or fashion wearables. And that's going to be a ginormous opportunity, not just for the fashion brands, but for everybody else that gets and understand what the user wants to do. Right. So those are sort of like my three takes where I would start from if a brand would come with me with that idea of strategy.
That's very interesting because it's basically like the framework. It's very similar to what Web2 companies, the big tech, are actually doing. And it's just interesting to see now also brands, start to embracing this aspect and applying it to the metaverse.
Just on that, like a lot of times, we see new and upcoming technologies and we want to come up with like an entire new strategy
Yeah.
because, it has to be all different. But if you want to predict the future, the best way to do is to look at the past. What worked before, right? How does the cycle happen? What was relevant? Which decisions were made? And that's always the way I'm operating, right? I'm looking at like, how did newspaper went mainstream? How did radio went mainstream? How did TV went mainstream? How did, internet went mainstream? How e-commerce went mainstream? How social media went mainstream? What were the advantages that brands took back then? And what were the issues they faced back then and how to overcome that now? Because it's going to be the same. People were skeptical. Yes. UX was shit. Yes. Nobody was trusting on it. Yes. There were people that were early on it that were really shaping the future of it. And if you got close to them, you got, to the sort of like the holy grail because they got it early. Yes. Like all of this happened on all those mediums, right? So it's the same. The same thing happens over and over.
It's true. And I'm also a firm believer of that, following very much the principles of Ray Dalio, let's say, that history tends to repeat itself or that there are at least some fundamentals that tend to be constant. That's really fascinating. And you keep saying that, and I want to get back to that for 1 second, that one of the challenges is that brands often think of replicating what they do in reality in the virtual space. That's one of the
Yeah.
main challenge. And so there is this element instead of unlocking the imagination, the creativity for experimenting with different type of experiences in the metaverse and different type of offers maybe. So how do you go about that and not just replicate whatever is it that a brand does in the real reality in the metaverse?
Yeah. So I think what we need to look here is why they do it, right? And the why is very simple. One is you're already taking risk in so many ways by trying to do something in this space that once you're taking all those risks, there is a moment that you want to limit the risks, right? And one way of limiting risk is doing the things that you're used to. So it's understandable, right? That you want to do something that you're already doing because it's working, right? So that's understandable. The second thing is that a lot of times they're surrounded by companies or partners that they are using to do the Web2 stuff or, the offline stuff. And that becomes kind of like, oh yeah, let's make it omni-channel, right? Like this has to be the same experience all over the place, which makes sense for a lot of different things, but I don't think it makes sense for the metaverse. Right. I don't think that we will have sort of like that omni-channel approach. We will have an omni-channel strategy of what you want to convey as a message or what you want to convey as a brand. But the way you apply that strategy is going to be different based on the medium you are looking at. Right. So I think that that's kind of like the why it happened. And now looking to like how to avoid it. I think that's the moment of like being bold and pushing the boundary. Is trying the stuff that nobody's doing and seeing how it goes. It's really pushing the experimentation to a new level. I think that if after all we've learned from going to through digital transitions in just a short period of time, and that's basically what, like 25 years since the whole internet happened and all what happened with it. The pattern we've seen is that the brands or the companies or the people that have been really the ones trying things and doing it differently and thinking differently are the ones that have stand out. Bezos back in the day selling books on the internet, people are laughing at him. Like, bro, like, how is he gonna buy books on the internet? Like, never is gonna happen. And look what Amazon became, right? Like when Jobs got kicked out of his own company, trying to push the boundary and do things differently, he got kicked out of his own company, right? People were laughing at him. It was a failure. And look where the iPhone got, right? Those are obviously two extreme examples to display what I'm trying to say. I think that, going bold and trying things different is going to be the way, like I see on the fashion industry as well, right? Why does a shoe has to look like a shoe in the metaverse? Why does a jacket or a hoodie has to look like a jacket and a hoodie in the metaverse? Why my shoe cannot be dragons that I put it on and I can fly around? Right? Like that, I think it could be an interesting way of exploring it. And also taking a lot of elements of gaming. A lot of people are telling me, but like you need to keep the user experience as it is. You cannot confuse the user when they're coming in. I was like, cool. So what about gaming? The most successful games out there are the ones that you can do shit you cannot do in reality. Otherwise, I would be going from a 9-to-5 job. I'll be stuck in traffic. I'll be commuting on the subway. I'll be entering a shop that looks like a shop. Like, what is the fun element if I'll be doing that in a gaming or, while playing games? Everything's possible.
That's true. And I find it super fascinating. Like maybe it will be even a new profession, a new job, like these
Oh, it is already.
Yeah.
Right. It is huge already. Like, virtual world builders, virtual world architects, people that are building experiences, virtual world experiences. I consult a company that has like 120 employees full time just building virtual worlds, right? They're building all metaverse platforms. And they're discussing the whole day, like, oh, how we go about like doing this box and that thing, and how can we push this and that, like just like expanding on the possibilities.
That's very exciting.
It's super exciting.
Yeah. Like I'm like, wow. Okay. Let's dive deeper into that actually. What are the competencies, the knowledge, the resources, the professional that people that you need, as a brand to have either as a consultant or in-house or whatever, to build your own strategy and then like to maintain this strategy then in the metaverse?
Yeah. So I think that to go from 0 to 1, which is the education element of it, I think you definitely need to be leaning. Another one's talking that they've done stuff, they have never done anything, because there's a bunch of experts right there right now. So you should just be mindful of that, right? So just saying. So I think like leaning against that is a good way to go, to start, to get from 0 to 1, to get a understanding. But the crucial thing, and that's what I'm always saying to the brands I work with, and is a way as well. Some people are telling me like, "Oh, you're giving all your secrets away, like you're shooting your own foot." I'm like, no, I'm enabling everyone everyone I can with the stuff I know, so we grow this thing faster, right? So like that's the idea. So enabling the team to be able to move by themselves and create their own ways of doing those things internally is the way to go, right? So you go from 0 to 1 with people that come from outside and help you out, but then you go from 1 to 10 internally with six external partners, because you're building all those tech capabilities inside. Otherwise, it's going to take you gazillions of dollars in centuries, but at the same time, the intel, the curiosity, the knowledge pools, and all of that has to be built internally. So that's why I'm so excited to be seeing brands building Web3 studios or Chief of Metaverse and all of that, because you start seeing resources being deployed in a manner that it will be more sustainable, right? There will be people full-time doing just that. And once that starts happening, I think that's the real beauty of things, right? Is when those things start becoming sustainable, when Because if it's still being the way it is right now, that, there are people doing 2, 3, 4 jobs at the same time and trying to do something here and trying to do something there, and no budget and a lot of limitations, and legal is coming in and saying no to everything. And like, there is no way this space is going to evolve, right? And there is no way your company is going to take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's super fascinating, and it's a window into the new world. Looking at this window, actually, what do you think we're gonna see more of in the upcoming future for the metaverse and for the brands that are approaching it? Because there are more and more I'm seeing that are really making bold moves.
Yeah. Yeah. What I think we will see more and more is mistakes, right? We're going to have like cases of don't do that kind of thing, which is natural, when you are in this experimenting mode. And it's really important to have the mindset that if you really want to be a trailblazer in a moment that nobody knows where they're going, getting lost in the process is you got to be comfortable with that. A lot of the brands that I'm talking with, and they're like literally Fortune 10 brands, they're looking at the long term, right? They are looking like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And that was not happening like 6 to 8 months ago.
Diego, thank you very much for this great conversation. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and I feel like I learned a lot about the metaverse and what's a good strategy to approach it. So thank you very much, and I'll see all of you on the next episode.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
That's all from today's episode. Thank you so much for watching or listening. If you find this episode valuable, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel or to the Polyweb podcast on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. It will be fantastic if you could leave us a rating, a review, or a comment, as this really helps other listeners find the show. All the resources mentioned in this episode will be linked in the description and in the show notes. See you on the next episode. And if you cannot wait until next week, you can watch this episode right here that relates to some of the things that we talk about in this episode. Bye.